This is Dennis Donahue, and we're back with another episode of the Grower Talks, and I'm with my good friend in person, Peter Van Hilton, who is joining me in California. But it wasn't too long ago I had a chance to finally join you in New Zealand. Peter, welcome.
Fantastic to be back, Dennis. I think I said before, I think this is my 7th visit now in just over 12 months, and love my visits to Salinas. And it was fabulous to have yourself and Gina over in New Zealand and Australia 3 weeks ago. Hopefully it gave you a bit of an insight into what happens down under. And I'm very delighted today also to say that this is the warmest day that we've had so far on this visit. And I remember when we flew into Perth, Western Australia 3 weeks ago, I think it was about 43 degrees centigrade and felt like flying into the tropics.
Yeah, so you guys keep score differently. All I knew it was over 100 plus if it was in our neck of the woods.
I think it was about 112. But no, delighted to be back and really looking forward to today's conversation with Hillary.
Well, our guest today is one of my favorite people in the industry, Hillary Thomas, who is the research and technical director with Naturipe. Hillary, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And, speaking of Naturipe, we were talking a little earlier. I'll have you clarify right from the get-go. Naturipe's kind of an interesting organization. Your focus is strawberries. So why don't we just quickly start out with what your area of expertise is and the area you focus on?
Sure. So I'm the research department of Naturipe Berry Growers, and we're the strawberry partner. And we've been around since 1917. So what's that, 107 years? Mm-hmm. We used to be a co-op, and so we're very grower focused.
You've got a great background and have had an interesting career. So before we kind of jump into some industry specific stuff, talk a little bit about your background and how you got to what you're doing today and what you are doing today.
So I'm an integrated pest management specialist. I did my PhD at UC Davis in entomology, and then I did a little stint in the Capitol as a science and technology fellow in the Capitol building, state Capitol. And for the last 15 years, though, I've been just touching everything technical related to strawberry production. So you name it, from automation to breeding programs to really traditional production research.
You're one of those folks in the wonderful world of automation and technology. You get a chance to see everything that pertains to strawberries.
You got to wear all those hats. Yeah.
What has interested you the most, and how has the adoption process gone so far? I know for instance, one of the things everybody talks about is automation and strawberry harvesting, and we're a decade plus down the road, and still not quite where people expected to be. So your general observations about ag tech and how that's been applied and works in your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last decade, and I'm going to speak generally about the industry, we've seen this increase in interest and investment in ag technology focused on berry production. But really, we haven't seen very much widespread adoption. A lot of the technologies that launched this industry over the last 50, 60 years are pretty antiquated now, right? The fumigation, mulches, raised beds, the use of clamshells, the use of drip irrigation. And so I think, and then there's been this separate movement, right, for new production systems, but that has very little to do with growing well in a prime production region. So I think we're probably due for the next wave of innovation in this industry.
That's an interesting summary looking back. I mean, because that, your observations kind of pertain to everything about growing strawberries and getting them to market. Is it time for a change, or are there external things also kind of driving that, whether it's regulatory or customer expectations?
I mean, I think where we're at right now, the challenges that we have in the berry industry, we really need to be looking at incremental gains and efficiencies, right? And then that has to fit within this narrative, right, of sustainability, whether that's customer expectation or regulatory. But we all have the same goals, right? I mean, industry, the public, regulators, we're all moving in the same direction.
Right.
Right. And we just have to figure out where's that common ground.
And since you brought it up, could you talk a little bit about some of the alternative production methods that folks have looked like with tabletop, indoor, that type of thing as it relates to strawberries?
So I think that world, right, of controlled environment, tabletop production, kind of moving out of soil, that's not really a focus for these prime production regions where
Right, right,
we have good climate, we have good soil,
right.
we have really experienced grower base, and they're good economic, right? It's the number one agricultural commodity in every one of these counties where we produce in California, and so those have legs, but it might not be for this region.
On a scale basis, in terms of market share, so to speak, in terms of go to market, you don't see any major changes from outdoors anytime
I
soon.
think California farmers will be farming in the.
Okay, fair enough. Well, speaking as a loyal son of California, I'm glad to hear that. So anyway, Peter, any
Very interested, Hillary, in the comments you made a few moments ago about ag tech and the kind of lack of adoption, really summarizing it in part to some of the challenges have been kind of naturally solved. Going forward, what areas do you think, or what challenges are you facing where you think ag tech could play a role if you look across, the whole production systems that you're currently deploying?
Ag tech's a pretty broad term. I think for me, it's anything. So when I look at the top issues facing strawberry growers, it's cost, it's labor cost and growing costs that have, exponentially increased. It's disease challenges that we don't have tools available for. And I think a lot of the technologies really are related to breeding and related, molecular and phenotyping technologies that allow us to breed faster in this crop, which is a clonally propagated crop. So it's very slow, right, to integrate disease resistance. And then it's regulatory challenges, right? So more and more asks, more and more documentation, more and more demonstration of data on what we do and why we do it and how we make those decisions. And that's a challenge for the average grower to do, growing operation to do.
Coming from New Zealand, I'm going to use an example that's not berry, is kiwi fruit. We know Plants and Food Research and Zespri very well, and they say it takes between 10, 20 years to develop a new cultivar when they're basically breeding a new variety. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of time frame and challenges you're facing in terms of developing new varieties? Because I do recall on a relatively recent visit to California, I think about 3 years ago, I was told that there was actually a bit of a challenge, the fact that the varieties that were being currently used were coming towards the kind of end of their life, and growers were beginning to look at what next generation of varieties might look like. Just wondering if you've got any comments on that.
So, the biggest issue for us is integrating disease resistance into our cultivars. Obviously, in strawberry production, we have a number of market traits that we have to meet, right? Baseline yield for profitability for the farming operation, and then quality, right? Quality traits that we need. But the need to speed that timeline up, the delivery of a new cultivar, it's not that old cultivars are getting tired, right? That's the little grower chisme. It's the idea that we have these changing environments, especially with disease pressure, pest pressure, lack of available tools, so losing tools that we've had before. And we need to integrate that quickly. And when you have a clonally propagated crop, we're looking at, a 13-year production cycle, right? And then there's the nursery increase factor. And that's really challenging for us using bare root production. So I think it's the emerging soil-borne diseases have made that need and the ability to integrate resistance more urgent.
Is this something that you do internally? Is this kind of proprietary work, or do you work with some of the universities and other research organizations, collaborate and develop partnerships to develop those new varieties?
And a lot of the technology innovation that created this industry was married to public genetics, right? And these huge innovations by the original breeders at the University of California, Bringhurst and Both, this marriage of genetics that are very resilient and work in our environment, and the optimal production system for those. So I would love to say there's something dramatic and new on the horizon, but at the end of the day, it is these incremental gains. How do you really optimize every component of the system to work between the genetics and the environment?
Is that a static world, or is it? Do those things increase? Obviously, things like weather, or I mean, is it? Think back of these last 50 years, or would we be talking about the same pest, or are there new ones in the game?
And there's certainly new pests, invasive pests that have been introduced. Spotted-winged Drosophila is one of those. LBM, light brown apple moth, is something that I worked on more from a regulatory standpoint, right? A quarantine, a regional issue about moving fruit out of that area. But, I think one of the nice things about strawberries is it is really the same pests we've had because they're native pests. So you're talking about lygus bug and you're talking about two-spotted spider mite. The challenge we have is having the management tools for those because they are native pests. They're abundant in the landscape, particularly lygus bug. It's a generalist. It feeds on flowers. And it moves into the hills, and it's on mustards, it's on radishes, wild radishes, it's in our cover crops. So that becomes a huge challenge for us. And it's causing direct damage to fruit. So it's not feeding on another part of the plant. And there's a lot of resistance to pesticides out there.
Well, and lygus is something that the industry, so to Peter's point in terms of working together, that's a good example of the industry has been trying to work together to address that issue, I think.
We've been working on that issue since before my time, long before my time, probably the last 50 years. And what I would say about the strawberry industry is when we're talking about the direction that pest management's going and sustainable pest management's going, when I look at the industry as a whole, we are using all of those practices. We're using mechanical controls, we're using biological controls, we're using cultural controls. We're using varieties that are optimized, right? So we reduce our use to pesticides, but we can't just tell that story. We have to show that story now, right? We have to demonstrate it with data, and that becomes a huge burden for the average a small farming operation, right? So that's where we can leadership really needs to help this industry figure out how to tell our story. Yep.
Well, without being disingenuous, I'm going to ask why, and I think I know the answer, and I think we would all agree. Most of the growers I know are pretty sharp, very geared towards solving problems. So, my sense is there's a bit of a structural issue of why it's challenging to get data in a typical strawberry operation. Why is it difficult to get data?
Well, I don't think it's difficult to get data, but what we're being challenged to do, right, is show every step of how we make our decisions.
Okay.
Right, with information. It's a lot of record keeping, and it's a lot of, it's.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is, depending upon how folks are set up to go to market in your world, for instance, it's interesting, like if you look at the elusive holy grail of figuring out the strawberry harvesting automation deal. A lot of people, they look at the big players, and depending upon how they're set up, a lot of people are working just with independent growers. And so people think, well, strawberry grower marketeer X is actually going to buy all the harvesting equipment. It's like, no, they're working with independent growers who are working with contractors who frankly, are generally not in the capital position to finance the development of technology. So I'm just kind of curious in terms of depending upon the company a strawberry grower might be working with, are they structurally set up to gather all that data depending upon how you actually gather it? If you were to use it, whether you were using technology in the field or remote sensing or that sort of thing. Is the grower necessarily, to your point, involved in every step that's required to get to market, if that makes sense?
Well, doing trial work in strawberries is expensive, but I guess I'm not sure I'm following what you're.
Well, each organization is different, so everyone is not necessarily completely vertically integrated, so to speak. So does that complicate the ability to gather data, or not an issue?
Well, I think we're speaking kind of generally, but data collection is expensive in strawberries.
Okay.
So it has to be meaningful.
Okay.
Somebody sent me a quote this morning, and it was like, beginners chase answers and masters chase the right questions, right? And I think in strawberry operations, you really have to be objective focused. Like, what is this measurable outcome? What is the goal? And what's problem does it solve for the growers? Because getting there, right? You have a wealth of information, but how is it going to be applied?
Right. Okay.
We're buried in a lot of data sets in ag tech. And what does it really mean at the end of the day for the operation? And who's going to interpret that information too? And who's going to use it?
Picking up on the whole data question, talking here about possibly internal use of data for production. There's also data very often required by kind of regulators. But one area which I'd be interested to get your take on is the role of retailers in terms of that relationship that retailers have with growers. I've used an expression many times before: regulators bark, retailers can bite. And very often retailers can help dictate, and certainly my experience of the retail sector is they're increasingly dictating what customers want, and that can impact on the size of fruit, the flavor of fruit, the texture of fruit. Do you feel any pressures or any influences from those retailers in terms of what they want to see maybe next year or the year after, and what impact would that have on your production methods?
Again, I mean, I think when you tell the story of strawberry operations, we are quite sustainable, but we have to be able to show it. And customer expectation is always important, right? But again, I think we're getting into a world where we all have the same objectives, right? We want to provide healthy, nutritious fruit to this nation and beyond, right? So, yes, of course, we're always responding to our customers' expectations.
I mean, what's your general take on the input side in terms of available tools to solve problems or address issues?
We're definitely losing tools that are traditional, right? And that's on the horizon. I think we're all realistic about that. We're also gaining tools in other categories, other registrations, right? If we're talking about that kind of tool, pesticides. I think where we haven't given credit is quite how much the industry has invested in exploring tools already. And so if the narrative right now is that we need to revisit this, I think, again, it's really important for us to stay focused on how are we going to stay in business,
right,
while also testing these things, because biologicals do tend to have, additional costs, right? And that also comes with additional environmental impacts, right? Globally, how this works. And then, they have needs, right? Environmental needs, they're alive. And so that's going to create challenges. So how do we do all of this? How do we test these things, right? In a way that is cognitive of the grower's bottom line. That makes sense, and efficient.
Yeah, and that's certainly the thing we've heard over and over again. And growers are very, efficacy and economics are, would drive their thought process. You're involved in helping provide input, and if you're going to look at new materials and let's say they're not proven yet, does the proof of concept or product development process in your mind differ from how you'd look at, let's say, a synthetic versus a biological, just to get you more comfortable with trying something? Because one of the things we hear is certainly there are products that worked, and I think everyone will acknowledge that, but there is also been kind of a historical level of inconsistency that concerns growers. So how do we address all that, particularly through the trial process?
I mean, I think it's just by having robust agricultural production research trials. And I've realized in the 15 years I've been down here that skill set of designing experiments optimally in a commercial environment is, especially in specialty crops, it's very much tailored to the crop. And if you don't understand the system, right, and the expectations and kind of the bottom line, right, of where all these inputs fit into an operating budget, then, we can't be in a world where we're just trying to optimize a biological to make it work, right? It's got to be approachable. It's got to work within the production systems that we currently have. Or the asks for changing those production systems need to have, they need to be economically viable, right? We're open to changing aspects of our production system if it makes sense. But we need to know what those asks are.
You've mentioned Lygus bug earlier on, and that's is one of the target pests that we've identified for Platform 10. And as you know, because you're part of the program, strawberries are a key commodity that we're looking at. And I always hate to use the word commodity when I refer to strawberries. It's a level above that. It's a kind of premium premium fruit. But no, in terms of identifying pests such as Lygus bug, what is your view? You've said it's taken decades. There's decades of research, and there's still no absolute solution because Lygus bug can be found across multiple crops in multiple environments. What do you think it will take for a kind of biopesticide solution to address or begin to address the challenges that you face with that type of pest?
I mean, I just want my fruit to be protected so it doesn't get deformed. So whatever that means, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Lygus feeds on seeds, and that deforms the fruit.
Yeah. So if I can kind of probably reverse the question a little bit, move away from biologicals to chemicals, what chemical pesticides or synthetics might you be using at the moment to address Lygus bug?
So there's a full program that but it actually really just goes back to detection, right? We use all of the tools that we can for Lygus because we really don't have pesticides that work, right? We're not looking at broad spectrums for this kind of pest. And so that's what I'm trying to say. Like the story behind strawberry growing hasn't been shown very well. But at the end of the day, we're using a lot of bug vacuums. We're using a lot of different tools. We're trying to prevent the onset of this pest and delay it as long as we can because we really can't spay our way out of that situation. So I think there is an opportunity for biologicals in that space. You know, growers aren't married to the pesticide tools that they have currently.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting just thinking out loud. And I know Hillary would. I mean, there are a lot of smart people that have been working on this stuff for a long time, and I was intrigued by what you just said. But biologicals could help with some incremental processes.
I don't know which ones. I mean, one of the things that's really challenging about Lygus is they lay a lot of eggs, and they lay them in all parts of the plant. So even though they feed, right, all life stages feed on the actual berry itself. That's hard. It's not. If there was something that could function as a systemic ovicide, whether that was a biological or not, that's my dream world as an entomologist, right? Something that really stops all of that egg hatch that's coming behind, because you can do all the spraying you want, but once they're in the field, they're going to keep hatching. So, I mean, I think those are the kinds of more plant health fitness related questions that might flourish under a Platform 10 scenario.
What are some of the other and I'm trying to remember our list. What are some of the other key challenges that you're looking at besides Lygus? Is it fair to ask, the strawberry industry in general, what are the top 3 or 4 things they're most concerned about?
The soil-borne diseases from, our problem. They're the biggest problem, emerging soil-borne diseases, and we don't have any tools for that outside of fumigation, right?
Right.
And breeding.
Yeah.
And we really think that the long-term solution for us will be breeding and integrating disease resistance into cultivars that also maintain all of these other performance indicators. That's going to take some time.
And that's
some of these diseases, macrophamina, it's not simple. It's not single genes. And you have trade-offs. So you have trade-offs and traits that we require to stay in business: yield, fruit quality, size, etc. So the soil-borne diseases are probably the biggest challenge that we have.
And as a labor, is that just directly a result of we really haven't come up with an alternative for methyl bromide yet?
Unfortunately, yes.
That's
really
almost cause and effect, isn't it?
Yeah, and I didn't want to focus on fumigation for the purposes of this conversation, but we simply don't have an answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. And we're, it is what it is. But I certainly think, as you pointed out, the world's changing, but we would like those changes to be predicated on good science and good economics. And but what that inevitably leads to, that puts a big burden on the plant or the strawberry itself to kind of fight things off in the breeding process. I mean, that's a pretty tall order, isn't it?
I think, I've utmost confidence in our public breeding program to lead in that area. And the major research that's going on at a federal level and international level really is being driven by the public program, and proprietary programs will benefit from that as well. So
there's a basis to be optimistic, just be patient.
Well, I don't think we have that time. And
Yeah.
I think we've invested millions of dollars as an industry in looking at alternatives, right? Alternative field level management systems. And at the end of the day, we still don't have the solution.
Okay.
You mentioned the word international. I'm interested to know whether the challenges you're facing here in California are replicated in other parts of the world, or whether they face additional challenges or fewer challenges to the ones that you...
Well, I think they are. And I think your region of the world has many of the same soil-borne diseases that we have. And I think you're probably, well, the Australians are, and both are leaders. And so I think there's probably some very good research going on over there that fits well, and would love to see that kind of expertise flourish, and that kind of ideological exchange and technical exchange.
Cool. Well, I don't want to kind of overemphasize any skill level that might exist in New Zealand and Australia, but certainly I mentioned before plant and food research. Certainly in Australia, only 2 days ago, we were speaking to folk from Saro who are over here at the moment. There is a lot of very, very sophisticated research taking place in these areas. What I like about that research is the connection between the researchers and the growers. There seems to be a very, very strong connection, partly because the growers are actually very often investing into that research. So there's a kind of common interest to deliver great results. So that's the end of the kind of, the poster thing for my part of the world. But the challenges we have identified, I think, in New Zealand and Australia, there are potentially some additional pests and diseases that we face, and partly due to climate. And whilst I don't want to go into climate too much, obviously the climate in California is changing, and I'm just interested to know what your view is, if you can look ahead 5, 10, 15 years, what the impact might be on growers here.
Well, I'm not sure how the climate's going to change in the Central Coast. I would guess it's going to increase by a degree or two. I'm not sure. I think the only thing I could speculate on is whether that increases the number of generations of pests, and then what times of year it's warm for soil-borne diseases to, cause problems in strawberry fields. Generally speaking, though, I anticipate we'll still be growing here in 5 or 10 years. And I'm not sure I would have said that when I first got to the industry. So I think that's a positive thing, and I think it's a positive thing for California.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, no, I think, though I've been to New Zealand, I really enjoyed the moderate temperature. It reminded me a lot of California. So New Zealand and California, I think, arguably are, regardless of what happens with climate and weather, these are going to be two of the garden spots on the planet.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, so I'll echo Hillary there. What has been, one of the things Peter and I were talking, and we were talking about Platform 10 with a couple of other organizations, and one of the things that we realized, I mean, intuitively we knew this, but this idea of product development that is really grower-led innovation. What do you see the value of growers getting directly involved in the innovation process? In terms of, because my take is, to get to ultimate efficacy in economics, you've got to it's got to go live in terms of how, when, and where to apply it, how much, those sorts of things. So would you view it as kind of an increasing trend to try and get growers involved on the innovation side, or and I presume you think that's a good thing.
It's always been the case in our industry. Growers drive this deal, and if it doesn't work if it doesn't work on a commercial level, again, I think it goes back to it's just so hard. It is very much a scientific discipline and transdisciplinary area to try and optimize a product in a commercial production system. And so you really can't do that work, right, in a microcosm. You have to do it, and you have to do it at scale. And for strawberries, that's an expensive endeavor, but, the potential rewards are quite big.
Yeah, I think that's one of, if I can just butt in here, Dennis, I think that's one of the purposes of Platform 10. It's actually to conduct field trials in commercial environments, working directly with growers. One of the challenges, going back to that term agtech we used before, which is, as you said, a very broad and generalist term, is grower adoption. And it's very easy for companies to make claims about how the efficacy of their product, the economic value of their product. But in my experience, it's primarily growers recommending product to other growers that will generate adoption. And what we're hoping, certainly with Platform 10, is that where we are able to identify successful outcomes for biopesticide products, because they've been trialed commercially in commercial environments with growers, that will increase adoption and accelerate adoption, because the type of challenges you've been talking about with Lygus bug, those challenges are replicated across other crops with other pests and other diseases. And it's only by rapid adoption that we can begin to see a solution long-term beginning to emerge. So I think that's one of the prime purposes of why we put Platform 10 together, and certainly delighted that you're involved on the strawberry side, both from your kind of research experience, but also the fact that you have had experience at trials over a long period of time. So I see that as being huge value to the program.
Yeah, no, I do too. Well, like I said, Hillary is one of my favorite people in the industry, and so we've had a good.
I'm just echoing that.
Okay, there you go. Just kind of wrapping things up. And anything we might have missed, or some things that you are important to know. I mean, I've appreciated your comments about and it's not just strawberries. I think all of us in the industry get a little frustrated sometimes at knowing, I think, the pretty good work everybody does, and really trying to do the right thing. And this notion of the regulators might weigh in, hey, you gotta, and it's like, well, we've been doing that. Anything I missed, or something you'd kind of want to make sure we're covered, just in terms of whether it's where the industry is, or some priorities or challenges worth noting.
I think we've hit on all. We're looking to work on all this stuff together, right, over the next couple seasons, and we'll see where we're at. What I appreciate and what you guys are doing is casting a new broad net. When I say we need a kind of next generation of ag tech, maybe there are things that we haven't explored at an international level. And maybe this idea that you're going to have exchange from different regions and have a more visible vehicle for that, right? Not on the proprietary side. Hopefully there's great outcomes that come from that, and great innovation that comes from that.
And one last question, because I know you a little bit. One of the things that excites you, and I think it kind of applies to all this, because we talked about the last 50 years, and we got the next 50 years coming up. You're a big fan of education, and I think a great example of I don't think people always realize what interesting careers agriculture can offer, and I think you're a great example. When I tell people there are more robust career opportunities than people realize in ag, folks with your background and affinity for science, agriculture is pretty interesting, and I know you like. I know you like education and getting young people excited about ag. Talk a little bit about that.
I do, but I think for everybody's goals, right, especially when it comes to like diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can't go outside and teach people, right? We can't be dogmatic and dictate to people. Really, the best talent is right here, right? The people know how to make things work are at the farm level. And if you cultivate that talent and you give them technical skills and you grow that talent, it's mutually beneficial, right? Everybody does better. People have better careers, they make more money, and the solutions are really tailored to the production systems that we work in. And so I think what I would love to see in the Salinas Valley is for this to become, right, the center of technology and innovation, not in an investor way, right? Not in the way that we've seen for the last decade, but in these really kind of efficient incremental gains at the farm level, right? How are we looking at the problems that we have through the lens of the people who deal with that problem every day? And so I think we have so much talent here in the Salinas Valley, and I'd love to see us invest more in that at the state level. And, you know, I guess I'm not about it. I'm not very good at ending my comment. No.
Oh, no. You did fine. No, well, no, I think it's important because I think the future is going to require all hands on deck and an openness to new skills and new ways of looking at things. And I certainly agree with you that on farm and from any role, there are more opportunities than people might realize. And I think you're pretty good at cultivating that.
But who better to solve our sustainability problems, right?
Right.
Than people who come from the farm. We just have to give them those opportunities, right? And technical training is trainable, right? Technical skills are trainable, but opportunities aren't.
Well, and the execution of, and whether it's the application of materials, whether it's gathering data, it's going to be the folks on farm who do that. So that they're certainly part of the mix of the Platform 10 conversation as well as the industry in general. So, Peter, anything else?
No, I think that's a great way to wrap up this particular conversation. We've been talking about the technology, but we've ended up talking about probably the most important thing, which is actually the people. Because without the people, without acquiring those skills, then a lot of what we probably hope for the future simply won't materialize. So, fantastic conversation, Hilary. Really enjoyed your inputs and insights. And just wish we could carry on. But time, as always, is a factor. But no.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, no, we're delighted to have you. And this was our first, we were all in studio together. So we appreciate you taking the time to come downtown. And we will look forward to continuing our work together with Platform 10 trials. Peter, that'll wrap up this episode of the Grower Talks, and we'll be back for the next one shortly.
Another awesome episode. Thanks once again.
Very good.
Great.
Hilary,
Thank you.
thank you.